Welcome, everybody, back to Woolly Wednesday. I'm Sandra Kirscher with the Livestock Conservancy. I am your host of Woolly Wednesday and program coordinator for Shave 'em to Save 'em. And I am here today with the second Woolly Wednesday of the year. Those of you who may have watched our January Woolly Wednesday know that we were talking about shearing and getting your fiber off your sheep. Today, we are going to be talking with an expert on processing that fiber at the mill. So let's welcome, if you would please, I'm going to get her in the stream with me. There she is, Mary Jeanne Packer of Bat and Kill Fibers in New York. Hi, Mary Jeanne, welcome.
Hi, thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today. So this is a big topic, big conversation that we've been having with fiber providers. They've been asking about processing pricing, processing timeframes. Do different mills process differently, different fibers that they specialize in, short fibers, long fibers, down fibers, that kind of thing. So we got a lot to talk about, and I know you have a lot you want to share. But before we dig into all of that nitty gritty, let's talk a little bit about you and Bat and Kill. Give us the 411.
Okay, I will. And before I do that, let me just say I watched last month's Woolly Wednesday, and it fabulous questions. So if any of you were on that, that's a great segue into this. If you missed that, go back and watch that too, because the two really go hand in hand, that we can make you better yarner products, starting with your work at shearing day. So by all means, go back to that. But anyhow, back to me. Bat and Kill Fibers is a carding and spinning mill that I founded in 2009. So there was no equipment here. I found it all and brought it here. And now there's 17 of us working pretty much around the clock in almost 8,000 square feet, manufacturing yarn, roving, and other products that I'll show you a quick tour of in a minute, and also talk about some of your options for processing in addition to yarn. I came to this from a background I have a degree in engineering, and I had owned a local yarn shop. I'm an avid lifelong knitter, and I just kind of put the two and two together when I began to notice, around 2000, 2002, that time frame, that there was this gap in the supply chain. There were lots of people knitting who really wanted to work with local fibers. And there were farms that had some really nice fiber, and they didn't really have a way to market that or get that fiber to the consumer other than at the occasional fiber festival. So having seen that gap, I set out to close that gap, and was able to do so really once my youngest kids left for college, and there I was with an empty nest. And I'm in rural New York State, not by the city. We're about 3 hours north of New York City, where agriculture is very big, and our county economic development corporation gave me a low interest loan that enabled me to acquire this old textile equipment and have it refurbished here in our mill. And we've just been going strong ever since. The local fiber movement, I think you all know who are listening, has just blossomed in the last 5 or 6 years, kind of following on the heels of the local foods movement, in which people want to know who made my clothes, who want to know where did the materials in what I'm knitting with, weaving with, sewing, where did those materials come from, and how have they been processed? So a place like this, with a focus on sustainability, traceability, and responsibility, just had an opportunity to flourish.
Well, we're glad it did.
Yeah, so is the Washington County Economic Development.
Do you want to go ahead and share your video here?
Sure, because once we see that, it's going to give people a framework for what we'll be talking about next, which is how is yarn made. So it's just a 60-second. It's how yarn is made in 60 seconds. What happens now? Should I press play, you think?
Yes.
Okay, here
You
we
have
go.
the control.
Pressing play.
So that's a great overview video. Yeah, I was very fortunate. Jeanette and I are one of our senior program managers. Went up to Rhinebeck last fall for, of course, the New York Sheep and Wool Festival. And we did a little side visit to Mary Jeanne to Battenkill and got to have a wonderful tour of the mill and see some things in action and learn a little more about the processing. So yeah, great video. That was great for everybody to see. They get a little taste of what I got to see that day.
Well, Eric, the guy who was helping me make sure I was AV savvy, put that together. And let me just say, I just took a bunch of shots on my cell phone, and he made you yarn making in 60 seconds.
Nice. Great job. Thank you, Eric.
That video, the long video, is on the website, batandkillfibers.com. And people can watch that in 15 minutes. And you saw one of the guys in the mill waving at one point. In the 15-minute video, you get to meet about 7 or 8 of the people who work here, and they all are waving and explaining, or I'm explaining what each step of the process is about. So people who want to know more, who, of course, you're always welcome to come, but if you're too far away to drop in, then you can watch the 15-minute version.
And so that video is available on this website right here, batandkillfibers.com. Right?
Yes, that's where it's at.
Okay.
So let's just say this about custom processing, that you can, at most mills anyhow, have processed anywhere in that process. If you only want your fiber washed, that's fine. You only want it carded, that's fine. You only want it pin drafted, that's fine. Single ply yarn doesn't have to be plied. Plied yarn doesn't have to be put into skeins. It can be sent back to you on cones. So there's every step of the way you can stop. And also many of the steps in the way you can insert yourself. So we have some customers who like to wash and pick their own fiber to get it just as clean and spotlessly clean as they want. We have customers that send their fiber elsewhere to have it go all the way to comb top, and then send the comb top here for us to spin for them. So there's a lot of combinations. Also at flying, we have customers who will sometimes want to have white, brown, and gray sewn together, let's say, to make a barber pole. And so we'll do custom flying. Sometimes they send us dyed yarn and want us to ply that in. So any of those things are fair game.
So lots of options. So if we pick up from where we left off last month at skirting, what would be what advice in regard, let's start there. What advice in regard to skirting would you have from your perspective as a fiber mill? What do you want to see come in your door? What do you not want to see come in your door?
Great first question. And let's talk one step between shearing and coming in my door, which is, if you have a market for your fleeces without coming to my door, sell. Sure, the more value you put into the fleece, the more money you can get back out. So a pound of wool is going to sell for less than a pound of yarn, but you're going to have to pay something to get to that pound of yarn. If you can sell a fleece, the whole fleece for 10, 15, $20 a pound, you know, those Rhinebeck prices, and
Mhm.
especially people who are watching with heritage breeds, when there's such a demand for these breeds, um, don't come here, just sell. The less you have to, it's basic economics. The less you have to spend to make money, the there's less cash flow, there's less handling, it's just gone. So, but on the other hand, if you've got access to a great market, let's say you already are doing farmers markets or you live in a tourism area where there's people just dying to buy your stuff, you stand a chance to make quite a lot more money by taking your yarn, taking your fiber all the way to yarn, or maybe even further to woven such as blankets or machine knit items, hats, gloves, sweaters, and the like. So a little bit depends on your market as well and your interest in marketing.
Mhm. Mary Jeanne, does Bat and Kill buy fleeces, or are you just a straight processor for folks?
We definitely buy
Okay.
fleeces because about a third to a half of our business are yarn brands, companies that sell yarn to yarn stores or direct to consumer and don't have their own sheep. And our best known companies that we spin for, Quince and Co., Hudson and West, which we helped to found,
Mhm.
and Bare Naked Knit Spot by Ann Hansen, and those last two are dedicated solely, their whole brand, to US sourced and processed. So they share our values. We also own the brand Oysters and Pearls, which is also completely locally sourced, and that is also dyed with botanical extracts. And so we're buying a lot, but what we're buying is pretty good quality. A lot of um, folks will come to us with 100 pounds of wool and it's all beautiful, but they really only want to get back 25 or 30 pounds of yarn. And we're happy to take the rest of that wool and trade toward their order.
Oh, nice. That's a really good deal for folks that don't have to want the yarn, but don't necessarily want to have to pay for processing. Yeah.
Well, they're still going to pay something because of this old adage of it costs way more to make yarn than people are paying for the wool. But
Well, yeah.
still, it helps work that down. But you had asked me about what should people do to get ready to
Mhm.
bring it here, and I think they should sort. And then I really want to recommend sorting. I think it's important that wool is sorted before it comes here. Have I said sorted enough?
So talk a little bit about what you mean when you say sorting. Are you talking about britch from back, from neck, from belly? What do you?
Definitely that. I mean, I consider some of that to be basic skirting.
Mhm.
Yet I am always surprised when we open a fleece and there are still tags and top knots and worse,
Mhm.
a lot of hay. We'll do a good job for you, but we can't get out all that embedded vegetation, regardless of how much we pick it and how many times we card it. So, in general, you need to send us what you're willing to get back when it comes to urine stain is very hard to get out. We don't use bleach.
Mhm.
We do use a commercial scouring agent, which will lift a lot of grime, a lot of lanolin, but a stain already in the fiber is never going to brighten out. And so that's why I hate to belabor this, but make sure you take a minute to sort that or recognize that you don't have the time and it's in trouble. Tell us. We have people who are happy to do that. It's work, you're going to have to pay, but it may be well worth that investment to have us do a careful sort for you.
Mhm.
The other things to do is don't pack it in something that is going to get damp where you're storing it, get dried out where you're storing it, get moths in it. The best possible solution is just a nice clear plastic giant bag, including the territory, the tall bags, but they usually hold 80 to 100 pounds. Not in direct sun, not right under the eaves of the barn, not right on the dirt or cement floor so it sucks up the dampness,
Mm-hmm.
and labeled. Every single bag that comes to a mill needs to have your name on it in at least one place. And if you're having 2 or 3 things made, then how you want the fiber in that bag needs to also be designated. Is it the wool for pillow stuffing or is it the wool for yarn? If you're not sure how you want to divide the wool, any mill owner or any mill customer service person is going to be happy to work with you on figuring out what to do with it. But the more information you can put on your bag, the better.
Mm-hmm. So once you receive that bag, say the person sending the shepherd sending that fiber doesn't necessarily know what its best use is. You know, would this be better for felting? Would this be better for roving, making into bat, like that sort of thing?
Right.
Can you, once you receive it, can you have those kinds of, it's sounding like that's what you're saying, that you can have those kinds of conversations with folks and say, okay, I understand this fiber to be this kind of quality, and this is my recommendation for this. Yeah.
And that conversation is usually better had once we have the fiber.
Sure.
Because despite anybody's good photography and excellent characterizations vocally, it's
Right.
still not the same as me looking at a handful. And it's not just me. Any mill would have probably similar opinions. Some of it we can predict in advance by knowing what breed it is.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain wools, if we're talking about wool today, that are going to respond better to one sort of processing versus another. One twist and ply compared to another, if we're going to yarn, will make different finished goods. There's a lot of that we know just from breed. And then a real basic question of woolen spun versus worsted spun. And there's no right answer. We are in the worsted business here. And you saw in our video the pin drafters that make that semi-worsted technically. We do have a comber, but we still aren't. It's almost running, but not quite. We've had it a year, but we're getting there. Anyhow, some long wools really respond better to the worsted processing because they're being combed, they're being aligned, and we're taking advantage of that length and planning, aligning that fiber to keep that length working for strength and luster in that fiber. But the other thing that's going to happen when you do that is it's going to be pretty limp. That long wool has, they call it drape on the one hand, makes beautiful shawl, makes amazing woven items, like home decor items, beautiful. But if you're looking for something squishy, cuddly, long wools at a worsted mill are not going to be that. So it's important to think about where are you headed. I don't know when we want to talk about blending, but it's tempting to talk about it right there.
We'll throw it in there. Perfect timing. So I told Mary Jeanne before we went live that we had a question yesterday come up in our sweater challenge group about blending these heritage breeds, specifically blending down breeds with long wool breeds. The person asking the question was looking for a little bit of advice on technique, and I thought that Mary Jeanne would be, I knew you'd have an answer. Let's put it that way.
I have an opinion.
Yeah, let's hear that opinion.
And it's a pretty strong one. The single worst way to blend is in the barnyard. It's so tempting to be crossing Merinos and Lincolns, or fine wools and long wools, in hopes of getting the best of both. And let me just say that rarely turns out that way. You get greasy coarse fiber is, or you get short coarse fiber. It's a nightmare. If you've got something a little coarse and long and you want it to have squish, the best possible way to do that is to have us add some merino to it. And we buy quite a lot of US sourced merino already as comb top, and we can just blend that with your long wool at the pin drafter. Or if you want to add softness to a medium wool, like a Tunis, a Corriedale, a Dorset, something like that. That's about a 3-inch staple length, and we have a lot of lovely local alpaca that even at only 10 or 20, 30% will add a lot of softness. And you wouldn't be tempted to breed an alpaca and a sheep, or if you're making sock yarn, you're not tempted to breed a nylon plant with a with a sheep. So think of it that way, that if you want something added, we can comb it in or card it in. And if you happen to have multiple breeds, don't put them in the same bag because we'll process them differently. A lot of folks are turning to mohair as an alternative to nylon for strength in sock yarn, or turning to mohair for a halo or a sheen for things that are going to be dyed. And we wash mohair differently than we wash the wool. So you can put them in 2 bags and tie the bags together, or put the whole bag inside the other bag with a note, but don't put the fibers together because we just have to take them apart to wash them.
You'd said something about when you were answering this question to me previously about blending, because I suggested that, or I was sharing that someone had suggested spinning 2 separate breeds and plying them as a way of blending. And you suggested carding them together instead. Am I remembering that correctly?
That's right. Spinning the 2 breeds separately and then plying them is not a good idea, because once that yarn is plied, you're going to do something next with it. You're going to wash it, you're going to dye it, you're going to knit with it, you're going to weave with it. And the minute you add water or a next process to that, the 2 fibers are going to perform differently.
That makes sense.
I see a little of it even in barber pole projects. Like right now, we're doing an alpaca Corriedale blend for a living history museum near us. And they wanted a 3-ply barber pole with their gray, their oatmeal, and their dark brown. And it's stunning. But despite their best efforts, the gray was more Corriedale and less alpaca. The brown was more alpaca and less Corriedale. So even in that case, even though they're both all Corriedale alpaca blends, we're seeing them perform just a little differently. So that's a real tricky one to make that. When we work with a couple of our custom processing jobs, we'll take half their yarn as white on skeins, hand paint it themselves, send it back. We put it on cones, and then we ply it with the rest of their white to make a really nice barber pole, really interesting effect. And we've learned to have that succeed, we have to wash the white and cone it and ply it. Otherwise, the white is going to shrink more the first time it's washed, and the dyed stuff isn't going to shrink.
Because it's already been wet. Yeah, that makes sense. So when you're talking about blending, combining these during the blending process rather than the plying process, how do you manage that with, a 3-inch lock and a 6-inch lock? How does that work?
Well,
without giving away trade secrets.
Well, it's no secret that that's an opportunity for disaster. I think everyone can picture the process of these long fibers drafting along so nicely, and then all of a sudden a little clump of short staple come and boom, boom through the roller, and that boom, boom becomes a foot long slub in the resulting single ply yarn. So that happens, and that's a risk you take. We will pin draft a blend like that a few passes. So we get at it through carding, or if we're working with combed top, then we really are careful to make a number of passes to make sure that the short staple is really evenly distributed with the long staple. And essentially what happens is the short staple just rides along with the long staple and it behaves. And the closer you come to a 50-50, the better. You really do run into trouble when you're adding just little bits of either on either extreme.
I'm glad you know what you're doing.
Yeah, this is school of hard knocks. This is not stuff that you learn anywhere.
Nope. Trial and error for sure. Yeah. So, what else did we have on that agenda to talk about today?
We wanted to talk about busy times of year and timelines and what to expect. We want to talk about processing pricing. We wanted to talk about shipping charges. So we still have all those details to go into. And what we do want to allow time for questions. Is this a full hour we'll have or 45 minutes?
Yeah, we'll have close to an hour.
Okay,
when we finish up, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Right.
And this is a good chance for me to invite questions. I did not do that during our intro. So anybody that's watching that has questions specifically from Mary Jeanne about bat and kill processing or more generic processing questions that she may be able to guide you on, please feel free and put them in the comments, and we will definitely get to your questions toward the end of the talk today.
Okay, good. Busy time of year. There's all sorts of busy times of year, but let me just say, there's a reason we call it no sheep and wool, as opposed to no sleep and wool, as opposed to New York sheep and wool, because there is no sleep leading up to Rhinebeck. Everyone remembers one last thing they hoped we could spin. Everyone wants 50 gram skeins from their hundreds. Starting from about middle of August till the day after Rhinebeck is clearly the very busiest time of year. No one's leave requests are granted unless it's extenuating, and it's our employees know this and have planned around the lead up to Rhinebeck. Now we also have a lead up to Christmas, a lead up to Washington County Fiber Tour in April, and a lead up to Maryland Sheep and Wool, which is in May. So it's getting so there's a lot of these events that are really driving the quote busy times. So my best advice is to just plan on 6, 7, or even 8 months turnaround. We will take reservations. And I don't know what other mills' policies are, so folks who are listening should check with your local mill before you just assume. You can call them up and say, I'd like to reserve a spot for August, because they may say, you what? But we found it's working really well here because we don't have to store the wool. It takes them all this time to be doing their shearing and sorting and thinking about what colors they want blended with what. So they place an order now and give us their deposit and tell us their best guess for what they'll be bringing. And then they go home and work on it, or they can just mail all that preliminary stuff. Once they've paid a deposit, they're in our lineup, and the fiber can come later on. Because that's a way to soften that 7 to 8 month window, that all the way to finished yarn. And if you're having machine knit hats and gloves or woven items, we can connect you to knitting mills and weaving studios, but they're just as backed up as as we are. So then you start adding more months onto the yarn making.
Mm-hmm. So if yarn takes somewhere between 7 to 9 months, how long does roving typically take? And I know that's going to depend on, where you are in regard to those no sleep times of year.
If someone came in here today with 40 or 50 pounds of nice clean medium wool, a Dorset, a Cheviot, something they wanted just made into 16-inch wide batting. They're going to stuff some pillows. They're going to make channel quilts. And they said, just dump this and run it. Just wash and pick it, get it off the carter, call me when it's ready.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say, oh, we'll do that in 6 weeks or so.
Oh, okay. So it's really the yarn that is the long wait period. Okay. Makes sense. Right. There's so much more processing involved in yarn, getting to yarn. So
what we kind of do in our production scheduling is run a roving job like that through the carter and then run a spinning job next. And by the time the pin drafters take 3 or 4 passes to that material, then they're ready for another spinning job. But in the window there, we could have done at least one roving job for every spinning job. So that kind of helps spread out our work, and that's why we can do roving jobs so much more quickly.
I always wondered if it was just, whoever got in first, it was first come, first serve kind of thing, but it sounds like the shorter jobs can kind of get worked in between the longer jobs. That's nice.
The other thing is color. Some people send dyed in the wool, and we're happy to run that as time and space permit. And we'll run them one after the other. We'll run pink to purple to blue to green to yellow to orange. Back now we're at pink because we can't be cleaning our equipment in between every color. So I would say we only card dyed wool once a quarter, one or 2 days a quarter, because of that cleaning aspect. So while we're happy to do dyed in the wool work for people, they need to figure it's going to take a little longer.
Makes sense. Yeah. All right. What other questions were we going to cover today?
We wanted to talk about money. Let's talk about money, honey.
That's what everybody always wants to know. What's it going to cost me, right?
Well, we're going to go right back to sustainable, traceable, and responsible. And it's no different than where I take my car to get work done. Here's a shout out, Slate Valley Automotive. But anyhow, they have a great sign in the shop, and it says, "Pick any two. Need it in a hurry? Need it cheaply? Want to help us do it?" You can't have it all.
Yeah.
And so quality work takes time and it takes money.
Yeah.
Here in New York State, we're probably this is a great ad for why you should process here. It's the most expensive place around. But seriously, we pay our employees a living wage. The minimum wage in New York is already double many of the neighboring states. And we pay more than minimum because the cost of living here is so high. And we believe that the people who work here deserve to be compensated for doing that hard work. Their kids need braces and ballet lessons, just like the kids of parents who work in an office.
Right.
And so we feel very strongly about being responsible members of our community. We also feel really strongly about traceability. And so if we're babying a kind of hairy border Leicester through our pin draft, we're going to run at half speed to get that material to comb through smoothly instead of wrap around our combers. Well, time is money. And so to get a really nice product of your own product back, you're going to have to go slower, more expensive. And environmental sustainability is also very important to us. And we rely on hot water way more than we rely on chemicals to get your fiber ready to be processed. So there goes another aspect of your cost. I don't know how to make that phone quiet. I am so sorry. Mute me and ask questions.
That's okay. It's already gone. It's already good. Oh, well. What else? So we were going to talk about money, and you did explain why processing can feel pricey to some pockets. And I know it is, but as you explained in the beginning, the further along the processing chain you take something, the more work is involved and the more that they can then sell that product for. So that does make sense to me, both directions. Questions for your processor was a big one, because what I've heard, and I don't have firsthand experience with this, but that not all mills can handle like all of the breeds. Say, a long Teeswater versus a double coated Navajo churro, or a short Santa Cruz downbreed. Some mills cannot handle all of those. Is that a true story?
Very much so.
Okay.
We do our very best here to handle as wide a variety as possible. But at some point, we have to draw the line on short staple fiber, and that's around 2.5 or 3 inches. Regardless of how tight we're allowed to twist it before we ply it. So we can get away if we're making a 3 or 4 ply fingering with Santa Cruz for machine knitting. We can squeeze in 2.5 inches. Plus, it's pretty crimpy. But if you've got a Cotswold with 1 crimp per inch, we can't spin 2-inch Cotswold where there's only 1 crimp. Like the picture on the screen has me terrified. It's beautiful fiber to look at and maybe to have made into a sheepskin, but it would be a tough one to spin because it's so slippery. It's just not going to hold together unless that's what you have on your screen. Would probably have to be 6 or 7 inches to get enough crimps to hold it together.
Yeah. So along those lines, we do have one question from Sherry Philman. Hi, Sherry. She says, is it better to process the entire length of a long wool breed or to shear twice a year?
Well, I see a lot of long wool breeds that are sheared something other than either of those options, and it's on an 8 or 9 month cycle. And so I know that's a real pain, especially if you have a couple of different breeds. It will feel like the shearers live at your house. But that might be best. And in the case of long wools, I would kind of err on the side of having them a little too long than a little too short. I mean, anything past 8 inches is too long for anyone. And I'll explain it this simply. The carder has a bunch of rollers that roll around. The smallest of those rollers are about 9 inches in circumference. So if your fiber is getting close to 9, you run the risk of having your fiber stay here at my mill forever. Just going to get on that roller and roll. And so you don't want that. I don't want that. The people after you really don't want that. So that would be limiting. You don't want it to get that long. But like we've just talked about, this uncrimpy long wool, if you shear it too often, it's going to really give you, it's just not going to make nice, smooth yarn when you run it.
Sherry, I've heard other folks work on a 9-month schedule with long wool breeds. And I know that if you're trying to coordinate your shearing with your lambing schedule, that can totally get out of whack. So it's going to have to fall into a personal preference. Is it more important for you to shear before lambing, or is it more important for you to shear every 9 months? I think is, and also, as we talked about last month, And if you didn't see that video with Emily Chamberlain Hickman, definitely go back and watch that, because as you all know, probably, lambing affects coats too. You could get a break in the coat. So
well, we really urge people to shear before they lamb for fleece break reasons, but also fleece quality in terms of, those little lambs are climbing all over mama and peeing and pooping everywhere along her better fiber.
yeah.
I just had my granddaughter over and I had a little of that happen to me. I felt like a grandma lamb, grandma sheep. Anyhow, the other thing is it helps keep the babies warmer. If mom's been shorn, then that her fleece isn't insulating her. It's letting her body heat. Sure, it's letting her heat escape, but it's escaping to warm her babies. And making it easier to start nursing when it's right in front of them what they're looking for, instead of having to search under a bunch of fiber. Also, and people told me this when I first started up, and I didn't believe them, but I've seen it firsthand, to fit more sheep into the barn.
Yeah. Sherry followed up her question with, what about the finished product with longer or shorter? So
I understood.
Okay,
Sherry's question is, if she sends in a short cut of a long wool breed, what would we make with it? And in that case, Sherry, I would say, if you still want like a worsted weight yarn for hats and sweaters and all, we would definitely want to make a 3-ply, because we want to make each ply thinner so we can twist it a little tighter. We could still ply it loosely to make a nice, as lofty as we could get with long wool. If you send longer staple, we can make you a 2-ply fingering to do shawls. We could make a 2-ply decay that's still going to have nice drape. Could be used by hand weavers for table runners or bed scarves. As far as machine knit, we could go either way with your fiber, but I'd probably want to add some medium wool down type or some fine wool to that, just so there's a little squish to your knitted items, like a glove or a hat.
Great questions, Sherry. Thank you.
Oh, I have one more thought on that, Sherry. Color work. A lot of when you think of traditional Fair Isle knitting or Icelandic knitting, those are long wool-ish breeds, Shetland, Icelandic, and they're traditionally made as a 2-ply, structure-wise, and color work really does well with a 2-ply. So keep that in mind if that's one of your objectives, that you'd want like a 2-ply fingering or even thinner, and then you can probably get away with it being a little on the shorter side for that too.
So plenty of options for long and short fibers. Yeah. All right. What else, Mary Jeanne, do folks need to know about working with the mill?
Let's talk about shipping. We're really down to the nuts and bolts now. But people, this is one of the top questions on my list of maybe top 10, is how to send our wool to you. The answer is keep it in those plastic bags I talked to you about before. Squish as much air out as you can. You don't have to go buy a vacuum system. I mean, it's nice, but not needed. Squish it out. You can't hurt it by squishing it. Pack it absolutely as tight and hard as you can into a good big box. Let's say 22 feet on a side, 20 to 24 inches. A good big box. So you're getting 40 pounds in one of those boxes. Pack it right in there. If you leave the box loose, the box will get all beat up in shipping.
Oh.
You need it really firm in there. Tape it well, label it well, and ship like that is the single best way. And that's how we'll ship back to you in a new box, but firm as well, with your yarn packed right in there, or your roving packed right in there. Given our focus on sustainability and traceability, we love when people and their wool come here together. And I think most mills probably feel that way. And that's why I'm excited to see how this industry is growing to be very regional. There are some great mills to work with in every corner of the country. In Michigan, you could go to Stonehenge. The McDermotts will just do a fabulous job for you. In Buffalo, Wyoming, there's Mountain Meadows. There's our friend Sarah at Mendocino Wool in California, Echo View in Asheville, North Carolina. These are mills that share our values of sustainability, traceability, responsibility, and you can go any of these places and hear pretty much the same story I've been telling you and have this same one-on-one experience with the mill.
And reduce your carbon footprint by not sending it across the country. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I know that before COVID, knocked us all out of our schedules, our fiber festival schedules. You mentioned Maryland Sheep and Wool as well. Do you pick up at Rhinebeck and Maryland Sheep and Wool?
That's a really good point. I kind of omitted that. That's the number one reason I go to those two festivals, is to pick up and drop off. We have a booth and we sell our mill ends and host some of our customers who are in the area who are looking for a space to showcase what we made for them. But that's the real reason we go to those big shows. There's a lot of long wool growers in the Maryland, Virginia, Southern Pennsylvania area, and long wool is also very dense wool. And so they can easily get 200 or 300 pounds in a few bags. And when you go and put that on the scale at UPS, you decide to not send it here because that's figure darn near $1 a pound to send wool UPS.
Wow.
So, and by the time we're done processing it, you're only going to get a half a pound back in general, all the way to yarn. So now you've added $2 a pound to your processing cost. So yes, we go to those two shows, and but all those other rules apply. The clear flags with your name on it, what you want done, and then we just bring a rental truck and pack it full of your stuff and bring it back here and carefully enter it into our system.
That's really handy. I know that some other mills do that throughout the country too. Go and pick up at fiber festivals, and if you can get yourself there, even just to drop off your fiber, that's going to save you a nice chunk of change, as Mary Jeanne said.
And our mill is located on the Vermont border, and these granddaughters that I mentioned earlier, I do go and see them too. So their dooryard in the Burlington, Vermont area has become a new wool drop-off point. So it's fine to just call and ask me where and when I'm going to be, because I generally convince my partner that somehow the second weekend in May is a good time to go to the coast of New Hampshire for a seafood dinner. And now after about 8 or 10 years of this, he's figured out that the only weekend I want to go is the same weekend as New Hampshire Sheep and Wool. And before he gets a seafood dinner, he has to carry a couple 100 pounds of wool to the car.
Nice. We have another question come in from Mary Kate. Hi, Mary Kate. Thanks for joining us today. She says, you mentioned processing for a living history museum nearby. Do you have other living history institutions that use your service as well? I work at one in Virginia, and we are considering using a mill to process the majority of our Tunis and Cotswold fleeces.
Oh, hi, Mary Kate. That's a soft spot in my heart. And my other life, before I was a mill owner, I was involved in first person interpretation and
I didn't know that.
yeah, explaining how things were made either historically or a point in time. And then I actually owned an ad agency, and we were involved in third person interpretive planning and doing signs for outdoor museums and so on. So the yarn we're running right now is for Abraham Lincoln's ancestral summer home that is in Manchester, Vermont, and still owned by the Lincoln Project. We spun for Shelburne Museum in the Burlington, Vermont area, uh,
Mhm.
several smaller nature centers here in the Hudson Valley, and nonprofit farms, the Stone Barn Farms that you may have heard of outside of New York City, that have sheep for mainly for demonstration and lawn mowing. But
Mhm.
it's a great way for those farms to those museums or those nonprofit farms to have some money come back from the sale of farm gate products. We spin for the Queens County Farm Museum, the oldest farm in New York, anywhere, is in New York City, and it was started in the 1600s. For many years, we spun for Colonial Williamsburg, which was easily one of my biggest honors. And I think the coffee mug they gave me meant as much as the check because of being such a fan of Colonial Williamsburg. And they have long wool there also.
Mhm.
So yes, we love doing that, and be in touch, Mary Kate, about any special discounts or promotions we can work out for you because of the soft spot.
Mhm. Nice. It's a good question, Mary Kate. Thank you for asking that. Terry Henley is checking in. Terry says thank you. And Tara Smith is also checking in, says, thank you so much. I always learn so much from Mary Jeanne.
I'm just smiling because Tara lives down the street from me. And so here we are on a international call, and I'm seeing my neighbor.
It's nice she's here to support you. And
Yes,
Mary Kate said, very cool. Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
So, did we have anything else on our agenda? We're getting close to the top of the hour.
Yes, I wouldn't mind talking for a minute about dyeing. I
Okay.
don't mean dying. I dyeing with plants, dyeing with botanical extracts,
Mhm.
dyeing with conventional dyes, and what people might want to know about those options. We're seeing a lot of folks interested in growing their own plants, their own dye plants, and learning how to dye their own yarn. And a couple of our customers that I just want to give a shout out to, that you all who are watching and thinking about, in addition to growing heritage breed sheep, you might also want to grow heritage breed dye plants, and you could follow them and see what they're up to. And one of them is Wing and a Prayer Farm. Uh, the
Mhm.
farmer's name is Tammy, and she's been working with a couple of really interesting breeds too, including Valet Black Nose that are not really in the US, and she's been in working with breed artificial insemination. But she raises a lot of dye plants and dyes all of her yarn with dye extracts she's made on her farm, and also Foster Sheep Farm that has long wool Wensleydales and Romneys, and doing more and more dyeing with plants. So if any of you are thinking of this whole responsible, traceable, sustainable that we've been talking about, do consider that. And then our brand, Oysters and Pearls, that we market as a finished yarn, you can buy either right from Bat and Co Fibers, or from Oysters and Pearls, or from the Woolly Thistle that specializes in kind of rougher, more natural fibers, rustic.
Mhm.
And we have that dyed by a partner of ours in the Philadelphia area called Green Matters. And Winona, the owner of that, is just so helpful to work with. And that's she uses extracts. So it's sort of a cross between having the plants in your own garden and traditional dye stuffs. And there's limits to how batch size available there. But if you were getting ready to make a 50 or 80 skein investment, I think she'll work at that scale. So it doesn't have to be hundreds of skeins.
Okay. Good resources for natural dyes, plant material dyes. Mary Jeanne, do you do any kind of dyeing at Battenkill? I thought you did.
We have done conventional dyeing here in the past, and we're trying to move away from the dye business for a whole variety of reasons: sustainable, responsible, traceable. One, we have so many indie dyer partners now that we don't want to be taking work they could be doing. So we really like referring our customers. I was just on a call yesterday with a yarn store here in the Hudson Valley who wanted dyed yarn, and I suggested they look up our friend at Wobble Gobble, who does beautiful hand paint speckled yarns. And people here in the Northeast have seen Wobble Gobble at all the festivals. And we're happy to make bases for them, but then work with someone like that, or Brooke in Virginia, in Richmond, Virginia. Her company is called Fully Spun Yarns. We spin for quite a few indie dyers on the West Coast too. Ritual Dyes, some brands, Ampersand Fibers, So Happy Jane. And these folks will take your bases and dye them for you. So we're really trying from that responsible standpoint to not compete. Also, from an environmental sustainability standpoint, we're not on city water, city sewer here. So we recognize that we don't want to run our well dry. We don't want to overburden our leach field. And as our washing has gone up, the amount of water we have available to use a day and discharge a day is kind of reduced to the point, why push our luck?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But that said, we're working on a project now for a farm in New Hampshire that is having blankets woven by Lily Marsh Studios, one of our weaving partners in Glens Falls. And they have 30 pounds of white Wensleydale Cotswold blend and 24 pounds of silver Romney Cotswold, blend. They're beautiful blankets, and they want 1 pound of that white made a bright blue to add an accent in that. Well, of course, we're going to make 1 pound of bright blue for them, and not send them shipping around the Northeast to get 1 pound of bright blue.
Yeah.
So it all depends.
Okay. It's good to know that you have it available if somebody needs to do a small quantity of it, it sounds like.
Right. And we'll help source. The same with Dyed in the Wool. One of our big Shave 'em to Save 'em partners is Holly Browder at Browder's Birds on Long Island.
Yeah.
And she's been partnering for years with knitting mills in New York City to have sweaters and scarves and other just absolutely beautiful outdoor wear knit from her Cotswold blends. And we'll do a small dyed in the wool run for her, which enables her to offer a little variety. And dyed in the wool is the lowest impact, least amount of water, least amount of everything. And she has a nice size run, 15 or 20 pounds in a color. So that's a good place. But not long ago in the summer, when Hurricane Ida went through Philadelphia, it washed away or washed out of business Littlewoods. So the single largest loose stock dyer in North America is no longer in business.
Oh, wow.
And that is going to be a real challenge. A colleague of ours is actually, I'm not at liberty to talk about the details, but we know people who are really working on coming up with solutions for that, because that's a long-term issue to not have loose stock dyeing capability in this country. So more to come on that for sure. But a big shout out to the folks on Long Island that are trying to really keep in a very closed system, very water conscious system. And they're working with the actress Isabella Rossellini, who has heritage breed sheep, and a designer, Nicole Delma, to come up with a beautiful line of wearables and hopefully some home decor items. So looking to the future, check out, I think Nicole's Instagram is called Mind Online. So check out Browder's Birds, which is sort of a funny name for yarn, and Mind Online to see a really beautiful collaboration with all heritage breeds.
Mind Online. I've definitely checked that out. Yeah. And I've been on Holly's webpage and I've seen her booth at Rhinebeck. They always do a really nice job. Yeah. Thank you for giving a shout out to them. They're Shave 'em to Save 'em fiber providers as well. All right. Did we hit all our topic points? I feel like we got through most of them, if not all of them.
Yeah, we went all the way from roving to shipping.
Oh, there was one minimum quantities. That was a question that just popped into my head not the other day, a minute or two ago.
Well, it varies by what you're having made.
Okay.
So some of the knitting mills won't do anything less than 40 pounds of socks, let's say, or 20 pounds of hats. So if your end product is like that, then that's got to be your minimum. Is not for me, but for where you're going next. Here, we would really like to see your finished run be 10 pounds or more, just because you saw on the video at the top of the hour, as they say, that whole long row of spindles on the spinning frame. We can't run some spindles at one twist and some spindles at another twist. So that machine, the little machine, is set up for 60 pounds in a run. Big machines for 108 pounds in a run. So we feel like we can go to about 20% capacity without losing our shirts, and our machine operators will just go do another task while your little job is running. But the setup and changeover, because every job runs by itself, is so time consuming that for yarn, we really like about 10 pounds. You saw the size of the carder. No lot size smaller than 5 pounds really even makes sense. If you put it in the back and push the go button, it'll be in there and you won't see it on either end, and then it'll come out. So 5 pounds is really about it.
Okay, good to know. Mary Jeanne, thank you. That was very, very helpful, very informative for folks, I'm sure. It was for me, for sure. Trisha Healy, thanks for checking in, Trisha. She said, thanks so much for the great information. And I think that was all of the questions that have been submitted today. I'm sure others will probably come up. If you have questions for Mary Jeanne, you can always reach her at batandkillfibers.com. And if you'd like to follow her or check out her Facebook and Instagram, that is at batandkillfibers. And of course, you know how to reach us if you need new stickers, if you want to get your passport, you want more information about Shave 'em to Save 'em, you'd like to see the new fiber profiles, which are available for free download. All of that is available at rarewool.org. And then if you are looking for other livestock related information, membership, donors, our bookstore, t-shirts, all that good stuff, that is all available at livestockconservancy.org, which is our main webpage. Mary Jeanne, thank you so much. It was great seeing you today. Thank you for joining us, for talking about all things mill related. Next month, we are going to have, we're going to be following along on the kind of the processing theme here. We're going to be talking to Roy Clemis of Clemis & Clemis in California. CNC makes all kinds of fiber tools, everything from little flit carters to drum carters to spinning wheels. They've got it all. So we're going to talk about carting next month. So do tune in. That's going to be a great chat with Roy. And that will be on, let me just check my calendar real quick. I'll give you the date.
Roy is so knowledgeable. I had a chance to listen in on his booth at Rhinebeck 2 years ago when it was Zoom only. That's why I broke into a big smile. He is so knowledgeable.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that talk. It's going to be good. So that's going to be Wednesday, March 9th, 2 o'clock with Roy Clemes. And then, of course, you probably know that this is for us, for the Livestock Conservancy Species Month. This month is Sheep Month. And we have one more sheep chat coming up next Tuesday, the 22nd. And that is with Dr. Melinda Ellison. She is the Sheep Extension Specialist at the University of Idaho. And we will be talking winter management strategies for sheep. So check out those upcoming events and definitely leave your feedback. We'd love to hear what you like, what you'd like to see more of, and have a good rest of your day, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.